Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We are in Parshat Ve'etchanan this week in the book of Deuteronomy, but we're also heading into Tu B'Av. The 15th of Av is this Shabbat, and according to the Talmud, this date is one of the most joyful days on the Jewish calendar, and I'd like to talk a little bit about it. What is Tu B'Av exactly? The rabbis describe for us in the Mishnah, in Mishnah Ta'anit, a strange and mysterious holiday in which all of the unmarried girls and women would come out dressed all in white, and they would go out to the fields, they would go out to the vineyards, and they would dance, and they would pray. Mishnah Ta'anit 4:8 says, "On these days, the 15th of Av, the daughters of Jerusalem would go out in borrowed white garments in order not to shame anyone who had none. They would come out and dance in the vineyard, and what would they say? 'Young man, lift up your eyes and see what you choose for yourself.'" A very interesting ritual described here, an ancient matchmaking festival. Girls would go out and look for their partner. Girls and young women would go out and look for their partner, for their spouse, for their match. And for those of you who have not heard of this holiday before, you might be thinking, what the heck is going on? Has this always been around? Has it always been popular? Has it always been observed? And if not, who brought it back? So I'd like to speak with you about a woman named Sarah Schenerer, who's really an extraordinary Jewish woman. If you've never heard of her, I'd encourage you to go look her up and learn a little bit more about her. And in 1917, she was a dressmaker with an 8th grade education, and she decided to open up a girls' school in Krakow, in Poland. And 10 or so years later, this school that she had opened up to educate Orthodox Jewish girls, to prevent them from becoming assimilated, to educate them, to help them love their Jewish heritage and the deep well of knowledge from which they could drink. 10 years after she opened up this school, it had turned into a movement with summer camps, teaching institutes, journals, periodicals, all kinds of amazing and fantastic things, all for young Jewish women in Poland. This became known as Beis Yaakov, and you may be familiar with that name. It looks different today than it did when it began in the early 20th century. The changes, in particular after the Holocaust, are noteworthy. And in its early years, it was really quite extraordinary and unusual and, dare I say it, progressive. So in the mid-1920s, she opens up the school in 1917, and by the mid-1920s, the celebration of Tu B'Av, this holiday that we're about to enter into on Shabbat, is revived by Sarah Schenerer and by the Beis Yaakov movement. And I'd like to share an account of one of those celebrations. What did it look like back in the 1920s? What did it look like back in the 1930s to be celebrating this holiday? So I'd like to share an account of one of those celebrations from the 1932 issue of the Beis Yaakov Journal, which was shared recently by the National Library of Israel. This account was originally written by a teacher named Hoda Movshevitz in Yiddish, and it was translated into English by Frida Wiesel. The National Library of Israel, in sharing the article, wrote, "The ecstatic dancing described by Movshevitz was not done before the eyes of prospective mates, as we learned before, as was done in Mishnaic times, or as was described by the Mishnah. It was not done before the eyes of prospective mates, but rather with no one watching." So an interesting shifting of this ritual. Tu B'Av was celebrated in Poland by Orthodox Jewish girls and women, alone in the woods with their God, their guide, and each other. So without further ado, here is the article by Hoda Movshevitz. Evening. The sun is about to set. It is already on the other side of the linden trees. Yes, the trees of Skava, this is the village where this ritual is taking place. Yes, the trees of Skava, you will remain in our memory for a long time. And suddenly it occurs to me, why does the sun hide behind these giant trees every day before it sets? Does it hide behind these enormous trees to prevent people from seeing the last few moments of its day? Maybe it doesn't want people to see the misdeeds it has witnessed. Is that why it reddens so with shame and hides its face among the enormous trees? But I can't be lost in thought for long. The sound of some exalted mood reaches my ears and rouses me from my speculations. All the seminary girls are standing in front of the villa, ready for our excursion. We count 115, and I too am among them. And so we set out. Frau Schennerer at the head. 115 of us girls go step by step, hand in hand, along the path. Frau Schennerer first among us, our guide. Our hearts beating with extraordinary joy, we follow in the steps of our leader and flag bearer. The sun is already completely gone. A star-speckled sky is above us. The glow of the moon illuminates our path. And we walk and walk, but to where? Our great leader is before us, and we follow her lead. Finally, we reach a forest. It's pitch dark all around. The trees obstruct even the bright glow of the moon. Suddenly, the center of our group lights up. Campfire, we pass the word from ear to ear. A flash of light, and then it's pitch dark again. Something over there doesn't want to burn. The bonfire doesn't want to start. Our teachers busy themselves with it to no avail. Some of us despair, but not those in charge of lighting fire who keep working with their bundle of twigs. They work with all their energy, lying flat on the ground with their faces close to the spot where a tiny spark still flickers. There they add a bit of their own life force, and finally they're successful and the fire catches. Soon a large fire is burning in the center of our circle, almost like the Jewish fire which we kept burning for so long deep in our hearts. It's quiet. No one dares to speak out loud, to break the silence, to interfere with what we are all feeling. Who? Every one of us, because we are all experiencing something tremendous. You can see it in our eyes. And then someone does break the silence. Who speaks? One of the students who begins to give a talk. She speaks, and each of her words rings out and is echoed back by the trees. She speaks of the meaning of the 15th day of the month of Av, about the holiday that belongs to us, to young Jewish women. The mood is serious, even sad, as she finishes. Again, a silence lasts for a long time. From time to time, we hear the crackle of the burning twigs. And suddenly, we hear the voice of Frau Schennerer. All eyes are now focused in one direction, and with great anticipation, we listen to the words of our great leader. Her eyes and the features of her face are sunken in the firelight, but her voice rings out. And the fire upon the altar shall be kept burning thereby, it shall not go out. And the priest shall kindle wood on it every morning, and he shall lay the burnt offering in order upon it, and shall make smoke thereon the fat of the peace offerings. An excerpt from Leviticus chapter 6, verse 5. And she draws a picture to help us understand what this means. In the desert, among the camps of Israel, the tribe of the Levites, and in their midst the tabernacle and the altar on which a fire burns that may never go out. This fire was sent by God himself to the altar. So was this divine fire not all that was needed to burn the sacrifices? But no, every morning the priest would add some wood. The divine fire can only burn for us when we have such divine priests who guard it, who feed the fire without cease, who add firewood without tiring of it. Only then can we be sure that the fire will always burn on our altar. And then no power in the world can extinguish it. And after a short silence, her voice rings out again. Many waters cannot extinguish love. This is from Song of Songs. Every person has within herself an altar. The heart of each person is a temple, and the fire that burns of its altar is the fear of God and love of God. God starts off this fire on our altar, but we have to guard this spark, to blow on it again and again without tiring. And again there is silence. All eyes are turned to the fire. Meanwhile, it burns. Dry twigs flame out on the ground. Our eyes are burning too, and maybe something else as well, something invisible in a secret place, a small and hidden flickering flame. No question about it. Each and every one of us knows this about herself without the slightest doubt. And suddenly we hear the familiar voice, "Let the children sing." And so we sing. Suddenly, we are so overcome with the urge to sing that no power in the world can stop us. There is none like our God. We sing, quietly at first, and then louder and louder, and from the middle of that song, the tune of a deep prayer rings out. Cleanse our hearts so we can serve you in truth. And ever more beautiful and stronger grows the song until we are no longer singing. This is a fervent prayer. and it continues for another minute or two until some extraordinary longing overcomes our soul, and out of our hearts tear the words, "Next year in Jerusalem." The tune grows stronger, more emotional, more prayerful. The fire in our eyes grows brighter, more radiant. We add wood to the fire and the flames leap up. We can no longer sit still, we rise, everyone wants to dance, and so we dance. Alongside us dances our leader, Frau Schennerer, hand in hand with us together. We dance, we can no longer see anything before our eyes. Our eyes close, our souls pine for something, everything around us disappears. It is so good. Our feet dance of their own accord. And so we dance, strong, stronger, even stronger still. The dancing lasts for a long, long time, and still dancing we return from the woods. And still we dance. We dance as we accompany Frau Schennerer home, and only later do we ourselves go to sleep. That was the 15th of Av, 1932, in Skava. A year has already passed since then. We have dispersed, each to her own way. But did the bonds we forged then slacken? No, 1,000 times no. We hold each other by the hand, united in one organization, united just as we were then, as we danced out of the woods with no one seeing us. We are each and every one of us deeply connected with the rest, even as each of us works in our own circle. I had to share this because I think it's just such an extraordinarily beautiful account, and I think that it captures really such beautiful ideas about community, about connection, about God, about Torah, and about the possibility within each of us to burn brightly in our own ways, our spiritual burnings, our intellectual burnings, our great bright ideas. And as we read in this week's Parsha, we read about the Shema, we read about this love of God, the command to love God and to serve God. And I think that as we go into the Shabbat, my bracha for all of us, my wish for all of us, is that we would carry some of that bright light, some of that beautiful dancing and praying and joy and longing that we just heard about from those woods in 1932 in Poland, that we would take that with us and carry that spirit with us into the holiday, into our Shabbat, into the week ahead. So I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom.